everyone and welcome back. Before we get going into too much of anything, I wanted to say thank you to those of you who did the research and helped me identify the Hempelmann sign. You guys gave me a huge amount of information to work with, and I'm pretty sure I know who it is now. I'm pretty sure it's Louis H. Hempelmann because he and the vet who used to operate out of here, which would be Joseph T. Ginneman, I know, kind of getting a little close in names, they actually shared an office on 9th Street in here, St. Louis. I'd love to show you, a Google Street Maps view of this beautiful building that they both operated out of, but the current site is a modern cinder block constructed building and is nothing really to look at. But it is still cool to know that these people shared an office at one point, or shared a location and address. So they were definitely contemporaries. Another thing to note that I think is kind of awesome is the fact that his grandson actually helped with the Manhattan Project. If there's one thing I didn't expect to find in the house, it would be a link to the Manhattan Project. But it's really interesting, and I thank you guys so much for doing all the research on that. Hopefully, again, I can find more of the sign. Spoilers, I haven't yet, but I haven't given up hope. And I think at some point, when I build the basement bar down here that I've talked about way long ago, I will probably recreate this sign. Because I don't really want to restore it, I kind of want to leave it a little bit rough in the way it is and hang it up beside it. So let's get going into some time lapses. I'll see you guys on the other side. Windows, windows, windows. Man, these two were a bit further gone than I actually thought they were. And yes, I knew about a lot of the very large chunks and stuff like that out of them, which aren't necessarily a problem. Obviously I just would fill them in, sand it flat, life's good. This stuff is currently still wet, which is why it's not sanded yet. But there were issues like this here, which might be very difficult to see now, but you can kind of see where I put the new block in. Which is right here, because it's a mortise and tenon joint, so the tenon is coming about here. So this is an L-shaped block of wood that I basically had to refit here, and then also had to pin it as well. So it's down glued, it's not ever going anywhere, and it definitely made this piece much, much more structurally stable. The rest of the window itself is actually in okay-ish shape. The top obviously is in much better shape than the bottom. But there weren't huge chunks of anything missing here. And I stress test it, so I move it back and forth. This one didn't really wibble wobble very much. Unlike the one we have here on the table, which all it did was wibble wobble. So this is the one you guys saw me in the time lapse pinning. So essentially what I did, stuck a dowel rod, this is part of that dowel rod, cut some little small bits off of it. And essentially I would drill 2 holes into each that hit the tenon. So if you look at the side here, you can kind of see this, this mark here. That's actually the shape of the tenon. And so I made sure to hit that tenon because this piece extends over to here and becomes, you know, that piece. These windows are made with what's called a mortise and tenon joint. And let me show you what that means. So this is pretty much disconnected. You can see this little sliver right here. This is what is called a tenon. It is part of this wood. So it's cut from the same piece. It's not glued in. It is actually cut this way. And it is a little square knob essentially off of this board. Now this board has a corresponding hole in it, a mortise. So this would be the tenon, this would be the mortise. So if we turn this on its side, so you can see the square hole and the square tenon. So mortise is the hole, tenon is the tenon. So that's what a mortise and tenon joint is. This is the type of joinery that these windows were built with. And it's a very good bit of joinery. And you can see that I drove 2 dowel rods in each. The main reason for that is a dowel rod is round. So when you just put one, you have basically created a hinge. And so it will still wobble. But if you put 2 in there, that stabilizes it because, you know, 2 won't allow it to wiggle as much. And then the top of this one was actually still fairly stable. Again, gravity pulls water down. That's why you have much more water damage at the bottoms of everything you redo in a house. So windows, doors, all of it. So yeah, I'm still a little ways off, obviously, from getting these done. And most of that's down to just dry time. Everything is some sort of time it needs to dry that can't be disturbed and touched. And therefore, doing any project like this within a week is almost impossible. Most products that I have to apply to these windows or any of these features need just a few days to really dry. The one major exception with that is shellac, which shellac goes off basically immediately. So any other product that I use, including paints, like oil paints and stuff like that, you know, you have to let them dry properly before you can apply the next layer of anything. So these are no exception. They'll be sitting here for about a day or 2. And I'll sand them up and then we flip them up over and do the other side. And then of course there's the glazing process. So these windows themselves will probably not be back in for another 2, maybe 3 weeks. It's just the amount of time that windows take to do, mostly because of the glazing. Because you have to let that cure enough to be stiff enough, that way you could paint it. So that's what's going on with the windows. We will carry on with those next week. And hopefully pull out the next set as well in the other window in this room. Lots and lots and lots of wood has been removed. As you can see, I've got quite the stack here. I do actually have a storage spot for this here in the basement. It's at the very front. It's a room I don't really use for anything, and it's perfect for wood storage like this. But to stack these all properly, I have to pull every single tiny little nail out of there. That way they will lie flat. And that's really time consuming, and I haven't quite gotten around to doing that this week yet. Probably will do that directly after you guys see this video. But this is where we were working last week with the windowsill and all that stuff that we replaced. So behind the electrical here, actually still last week had all of its beadboard. I removed all of it very carefully. Luckily, the box here actually wasn't screwed into the beadboard. It just screwed into the rafters up here. And so it was easy to kind of just wiggle it out and free or behind the box and out. So we didn't really have to do anything here, but I had to just kind of wiggle it around those panels. And because we found that amazing sign, I kind of wanted to do a bit more digging and see that maybe one of these pieces of wood here could be another part of the Himpelman sign. So far, no luck. Neither this piece or that piece are part of that sign, at least from what I can tell. And I've gotten a pretty good look at both of these two and determined that they are not part of the sign. That still, however, does leave this sill here as a possibility and the upper part up there. So we will have to see if one of these two potentially has more clues to the sign. But if I'm being honest about the entire thing, I don't think any of these pieces are part of that sign. In fact, I don't think there's another piece of it in the entire house. The reason I say that is because I actually believe that this piece might have been replaced at one point. That piece of sign actually has slightly different nails in it versus everything else I've messed with. So I imagine this had been added at some point. And from what I know about the Ginneman family, again, the Veterinaries family, after the veterinarian himself, Dr. Ginneman, died, his sisters used this space, this room here, as a dog grooming station. And I absolutely know that as a fact because I've spoken with the family. Pat, actually, the lady that's my contact for the Ginneman family, actually made our wedding cake, which was really cool to have another little part of the history of the home present at our wedding. And from speaking to Pat, I also know that the two daughters were very frugal. So my guess for why this board here happened to be the back of that sign is I bet it was left over from their father. And they thought, well, it's a piece of wood like any other wood. And they just use it to slap on right here because it was handy and around. And you know, if you already have a piece of wood lying here, why go buy a new piece? So that is my hypothesis. It doesn't mean I'm correct about this whatsoever, but that's my best guess. So that's gonna be it for this week's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Per usual, I've just been chipping away at it because as you guys have seen this process go on, you know it's a lot of little tedious work always. But little by little, everything gets better, everything looks better, the building's more structurally sound, and I'm solving problems that if I didn't pick at these things, I wouldn't know about. So I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys again real soon. Bye-bye.